Hello, I'm Patricia Raskin, and today I'm interviewing Rabbi Elan Babchuck, who serves as Executive Vice President at CLAL, the National Jewish Center for Learning and Leadership, and he is the founding executive director of Glean Network, an incubator and network for faith-based entrepreneurs. Rabbi Babchuck served as rabbi at Temple Emanu-El for 4 years. Welcome, Rabbi Babchuck.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. As we celebrate the centennial milestone for Temple Emanu-El, what aspects of Jewish tradition or values do you believe are essential to preserve for future generations?
It's a great question, and frankly, it's a question that has been very live within the conservative movement for some time, right? The conservative movement, by definition, seeks to conserve something, which I think is actually different than preserve, right? We never want shelf-stable Judaism, right? There's nothing. We don't want Judaism that has those kind of additives that are going to make it feel artificial in future years. We don't want to mummify Judaism. What we want to do is actually hand down a covenantal kind of Judaism to future generations that makes them feel beholden to the covenant and invites them also to feel fully alive in dialogue with the covenant, which means that it can't be preserved, quote unquote. Maybe you can say it can be conserved, but the ideal is that it can be passed down such that it continues to mold people and be molded by those people. Right? That is a living, breathing Judaism that will surpass even our wildest imaginations. There's a beautiful midrash about Moses coming back hundreds of years later after receiving the Torah, giving it to the Jewish people, getting them to the promised land, and he comes back and he's sitting in the last row of Rabbi Akiva's class in his Beit Midrash, and there's many back and forth, and God is a character in the Midrash, and they have all these but the fundamental takeaway from what happens to him is that Moses, the great leader Moses, who wrote the Torah by his hand, cannot understand what Rabbi Akiva is talking about. That in just a short number of generations, Judaism, the living, breathing Judaism that he handed down, has evolved so dramatically that Moses, the greatest leader in the history of the Jewish people, can't even understand what's happening in a simple Beit Midrash class led by an incredible teacher. So that, for me, is very instructive for how we live Judaism. We want to hold on to, we want to conserve the things we care most about so that our grandchildren will continue to love Judaism and live Judaism. And we also need to do so with a great sense of humility and the knowledge that probably a few generations from now, it's going to look a lot different than it did in our day.
And I think that leads into my next question. How do you see the role of rabbi evolving in response to the way society is shifting?
Right. So rabbi is a possessive term, right? What's a rabbi without any students? Not a rabbi. Because rabbi means my teacher. Rabbi in Hebrew means my great teacher, my master, my conduit of Torah and of sacred values. And I think as we continue to evolve, what does it mean to be a rabbi in future generations? What does it mean to be it simply means to stay in close relationship with the people that you hope to lead. I think one of the most beautiful traditions of Temple Emanu-El, and this is part of, when Lizzie and I were looking for a place to start my career and really start our family, we looked at big cities, small cities, West Coast, East Coast, Midwest, South, North. We were everywhere. And the second that we stepped foot in Temple Emanu-El, we knew this is home. Right? Because this is the kind of place. It's a small enough city. It's a big community, but it is so deeply connected and warm, and the networks are really thick that we knew right away that I had an opportunity there, both serving as the rabbi professionally at the synagogue, but now where I get to be still a rabbi, but a parishioner, to have these incredibly deep, close relationships where people can call me rabbi, and it is a possessive term, but it's completely relational. It's one of the most beautiful things about Emanu-El.
And that leads me into my next question, Rabbi Babchuck, and that is, can you share a memorable experience or a story that you had as rabbi that encapsulates what you think is the spirit of Temple Emanu-El?
Oh wow, just a great question. Um,
Just think of one.
yeah, the way I think of Emanu-El, and I used to do this sometimes when I worked there. I would go into the chapel was a place where I could really meditate, and I loved it. I just had a special connection with the chapel, but I would sometimes sit in the sanctuary, especially at times when I was needing to make a big decision in life, or when I was trying to discern something or better understand how I was operating in the world. And I would sit in the sanctuary under that big dome and feel so humbled by it. But then, you look up, every single corner of the room has the names of the people that have been in that room and that have loved that space and that have loved each other and loved the synagogue and loved the community. And even you could sit in a room with 700 seats and be the only person in there and not for one moment feel like you are alone. Now, the beautiful thing about that dome is that you can't whisper in the sanctuary without somebody else on the other side of the room hearing everything that you are saying, right? That's the way the acoustics work. And for me, I think that maybe this isn't a story per se, but that for me is emblematic of what Emanu-El is really about. It really is the kind of place. Now, sometimes you're like, gosh, Providence, Rhode Island, such a small Jewish community and everybody's in each other's business. But that's actually one of the best. That's a feature, not a bug, right? That's one of the best things about being part of this community, that even when somebody whispers and their whisper is, gosh, I'm feeling challenged today, or I'm whispering the name of somebody who's sick during a Misha Berach, or I'm whispering a yearning that I have during my own personal prayer, someone else is going to hear it. And they're going to know in their heart of hearts that you're praying for something. You're praying for the healing for someone else. You're praying for discernment. And they're going to be there to pray with you. They're going to be with you to pray with you. And they will probably do everything they can in their power to help that prayer be answered too. That for me is what's so beautiful about this community.
Yeah, and you talk about personal challenges that we face in this, but what about the pressing challenges that we're facing now in the Jewish community? How do you think we can address them together as a congregation and as a community at large?
When the 2013 Pew study came out, so the Pew Center does sociological data and they study trends and they put out reports. And this particular 2013 study was about the study of Jewish Americans in 2013. They since had a follow-up in 2020. Now, the majority of professional Jews and others who read the Pew takeaways read that data and said, oh my goodness, the sky is falling. Affiliation rates are down, intermarriage rates are up, fewer people are going to synagogue, young people don't believe in this or that, and they're not doing this or that. You could read the numbers and say, oh my goodness, the sky is falling. Personally, that's not how I read them. I'm an optimist by nature, but I'm also somebody who likes to look at the numbers and not just take whatever conclusion someone else is giving me, but I also want to know, what does the data really say? Now, if you really read the data, you would know that actually affiliation rates are pretty flat. There are so many growth segments in Jewish life. Yes, doesn't mean there's not things to worry about, but worrying is not going to get us to where we need to be in the next generation of Jewish life, right? There's a great deal of good news in Jewish life. And I got up in 2013 and I said, I have a promise to tell you, which is that I'm never going to ask you for a dime, even though it would be easy. I'm never going to fundraise by telling you that the sky is falling in Jewish life, or that we're the last generation of Jews to do it the right way. Which, by the way, is one of the great privileges of every generation of Jews, that for thousands of years, we've all been sure that we were going to be the last generation. And I love it that we are always wrong. But here's the key. Yes, we are always wrong, but we only know that we're wrong in retrospect. And until the next generation knows that the previous one was wrong, that generation is going to work as hard as they possibly can to create vibrant, dynamic Jewish life that is good for them and their souls today, and also plants the seeds in the souls of their grandchildren that don't even exist yet, right? Lizzie and I are blessed with 3 kids, and every single day I think about what are the seeds that I can plant in the minds, hearts, and souls of people who aren't even here yet.
Mm.
So to answer your question, what can we do, to ensure future Jewish life, or to address the most pressing challenges? I want to say this. I want us to take the challenges seriously. And I want us not only to think with our pragmatic brains, but also to think with our hearts, our spirits, and have a little bit of faith. That every single generation has been certain that those present challenges, those pressing challenges, were the ones that were going to be the nail in the coffin of Jewish life. The number of people that have written an article called Mourner's Kaddish for conservative Judaism, Mourner's Kaddish for liberal Judaism, Mourner's Kaddish for synagogues. I don't want to read any one of those articles, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to do everything I can on the other side to ensure that that life is vibrant and that that Judaism is living when we hand it to the next generation.
So in saying that about handing it to the next generation and future generations, looking ahead to the next 100 years, having celebrated this 100 years, what are your hopes and aspirations for the future of Judaism?
I'll answer that in 2 ways. The first is that, just like I referenced the story about Moshe and Rabbi Akiva, right? That Moshe, just a few generations later, ends up in Akiva's classroom and doesn't understand a word that Akiva's saying. I want to say that I won't be here when we have our 200-year anniversary of Temple Emanu-El, but I hope that if whatever form I'm in, if I can look down on that, or God willing, I'm looking down. If I can see what's happening at that gathering, that I will not recognize the vast majority of what is happening. It's going to look different. It'll sound different. It'll be different. They'll eat different foods. They'll pray different prayers. That would mean that we have handed down a living, breathing Judaism that continues to evolve in the minds, hearts, and spirits of everybody who practices it. And that there would be noticeable, sort of quintessential Temple Emanu-El touches to whatever that 200-year anniversary gathering looks like. That you would know every single person in that room feels known and loved. And every single person in that room feels connected to someone else in that room who brought them a meal when their mom was sick, and who stood up when in morning minyan, or whatever morning minyan looks like in 100 years, when they were saying Kaddish for a sibling. Like the quintessential touches that make it Emanu-El will never go away. Even as the bells and the whistles and the ways it looks and sounds and feels and operates might shift, that the core part of what makes it Temple Emanu-El, the stuff that was in the hearts of the people who built it 100 years ago, who first dug the shovel in on the corner of Sessions and Taft, that 200 years after they first put shovel to dirt, that those same values, those same touches, those same ways of being and living and operating in the world are still alive and well 200 years later.
Yeah, beautifully said. Beautifully said. Now, my last question is a perfect question to ask you, because you serve as executive vice president at Klal, which is the National Jewish Center for Learning and Leadership, and as founding director of Lean Network, which is an incubator and network for faith-based entrepreneurs. Here's my last question. What advice would you offer to aspiring rabbis or those who consider a career in Jewish leadership based on your own experiences and your current role at Klal?
I will tell you what a dear friend, I will give you 2 pieces of advice that aren't mine. One of them was from Kenneth Hoffman, who's the father of my best friend growing up, Dave. And Ken is a lawyer and since retired, but I came downtown Boston one day for lunch with him, and I asked him, "What do you think I should do? I'm considering being a lawyer or being a rabbi." And he said, "Elan, if there's anywhere else in the world that you can imagine yourself being, anything else in the world that you could imagine yourself doing, any way else that you can imagine yourself serving, then do that. But if there's not, then yes, you should become a rabbi."
And you unequivocally answered, there is not, this is what I want to do.
There is nothing else in the world that I can imagine will light my soul on fire, will allow me to leave the world better than it was when I found it, will allow me to serve others who are in deep need of being served and being loved and being cared for through these ancient traditions and through the modern ones too that make up Jewish life. And the other advice I would give is from Larry Kushner. And Larry Kushner gave this advice to a friend of mine who was going through the search process as she was 2 months away from getting ordained. And she was very, very anxious, as was I. Where are we going to end up? What kind of rabbi am I going to be? What city will I live in? What kind of institution will I serve? What does it mean to be a rabbi in the world today? And he said to her, this is my friend Sarah, he said, "Sarah, you've been studying theology for 5 years. You are one of the greatest student speakers I've ever had in my class to speak about God. No one else speaks about God the way you speak about God. And yet, during this liminal time during which you don't know where you're going to end up and what it's going to look like for you to be a rabbi out in the world, we forget God. So let me answer your question with something that you taught me through a sermon recently, which was, what if you imagine that you will end up where God most needs you to be? And then wherever you end up, that's where God most needs you to be. And that's the number one thing that you need to believe as soon as you get there."
Beautiful. Follow-up question, Rabbi Babchuck, and that is that now the work you're doing is not exactly the same in the same form as you did when you were a rabbi, practicing rabbi. How is it still as fulfilling for you? How are you still fulfilling the mitzvot, if you will, not in the pulpit, but in a different role as executive director of Klal?
It's a great question. So just a correction, I'm still a practicing rabbi. There's a notion that rabbis are only the people who stand up on the bima, give sermons on Shabbat morning and so on. They only serve in pulpits, but there are many, many different ways to be a rabbi in the world. And I'm grateful that my path has continued to evolve over time. And like I said at the beginning about what it means to be a rabbi, it means, is there someone else out there who calls you my teacher? If there's not, then you don't have the title anymore. So it's a simple thing. So what I'm grateful for is that in this moment, I'm able to serve in a national setting, which sometimes means I'm up 30,000 feet thinking about the broader ideas and the sociological trends and giving talks about the big things about the future of Judaism and writing books about the future of leadership and faith institutions. And I wouldn't be able to do any of that if I weren't also gifted with opportunities to serve as a one-on-one rabbi with a lot of the same people that I cared so deeply about when I served them from the pulpit. That many of those folks are still we are deeply connected in that learning process. And the other thing I'll say is that actually these days, a lot of that one-on-one work of being, let's call it pastoring, actually I do with other rabbis. So folks who are going through their discernment process, or they're struggling to determine, to figure out who am I in this unfolding drama, and how do I want to be a rabbi in the world, and so I've had the blessing of having some roles as mentor and as coach and as sometimes cheerleader, but often as rabbi to the rabbis, which for me is just an incredible gift.
Any closing thoughts about Temple Emanu-El? You're a member of Temple Emanu-El. You served as rabbi. Closing thoughts for us.
Sure.
And during our centennial.
Yeah, we tend, so one of my passions for the last 15 years or so has been studying positive psychology. And one of the things that I found is that we as humans spend most of our time worrying about the past or feeling anxious about the future. Right? If you ask anybody, any given moment, they might look like they're wearing headphones. They're totally listening to whatever podcast they're listening. The truth is, actually, somewhere in their mind, they're thinking, "Gosh, I think I really made a mistake in the past, or I wish I changed this, or I'm worried about something in the future." Like we're so good. Our brains are so good at taking us anywhere except for the present. And so, what I want to say, just we have such a remarkable history. Temple Emanu-El has such a remarkable history. We could have written a yearbook every single year for the last 100 years, and it would have been chock full of wisdom and highlights and growth moments and just incredible revelations for people to reflect on. We have such a rich history. We should be tremendously proud of it. And we have such a bright future. And as excited as we are, I'm sure there's anxiety. Are we going to have enough money? Will the endowment last? Will the building last? Those are questions for another day. Today, as we celebrate the centennial, I want to invite you as this is something I get to do every single time I walk into shul with my kids and we go to Tat Shabbat, and I get to look around and say, Hine matovu manayim. How wondrous is it to be here together? And I don't just mean that in a schlocky way. What I really mean is look at where we are today. Look at where we are. We are strong. We're vibrant. We're growing. We have amazing leadership. That for everyone who worried about where are the young people, just take a look at Tat Shabbat any Saturday morning. And if the cacophony doesn't wake you up, I don't know what will. We are in such a remarkably healthy place, psychologically, spiritually, and financially healthy place. We have so much to be proud of. And so really, the final thought is celebrate the past, be excited about the future, but more than anything else, be incredibly grateful for what we have, because we are such a rich, vibrant, wonderful community. And I'm truly grateful for the opportunity, despite having left the pulpit in 2016, to now be a congregant at this place that I wouldn't have it any other way.
Thank you, Rabbi Babchuck. Very inspiring, as always, and heartwarming. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right. All right, everyone. I'm Patricia Raskin, and that's a wrap for today. Thank you.